Hi. Hi, Matt.
Oh, it is my computer. Okay.
Hey, come on in.
We also have Miss Linda here.
Hi.
She'll join on my computer if that's okay.
Yeah. Oh, here we go. Okay. So I'm just trying to remember how to share my screen. I don't know if you guys know this, but it's kind of awkward to create a PowerPoint about yourself. So trying to pull that up. Are you guys able to see it just fine? Cool. So are you guys able to see like the note section or just like what says the Introvert Ignites?
Just the Introvert Ignites.
Awesome, that's great. Well, I guess we can get started. I'm glad that I got some people to join in, and just to start off with, I kind of want to get an idea of, you know, what made you guys want to join into this Lunch and Learn?
I'll go.
Okay.
Because I'm an introvert and I like listening to you talk.
Cool.
I was just really excited about hearing about just how you found your path. I like that idea of learning more about how everybody does it differently. So.
Cool. Sorry, I'm taking off my shoes to get more comfortable. All right, well then I'll go ahead and get started. I really want to make this more of a series where we can get more people on board to talk about it. If anybody else is an introvert but doesn't feel quite up to the task of talking about themselves and how they got to where they're going, then it could always be something where you can create a presentation or do some sort of write-up where someone else might be able to share, or we could do like a panel thing so it's not, you know, just one person on the spot. But I think it's super important for everybody to be able to share, you know, their stories, because I think it's super easy, especially from my point of view, being someone who is an introvert, to kind of get more, I guess, narrowing your scope or your field of vision into sometimes just looking at what you're doing and, you know, why not me for certain things. So yeah, I think it's important for everyone to show or share how they got where they're going. So I mean, my goal for today is to, you know, show some transparency about how I've become like a senior employment consultant, how I've become a mentor, how I've gotten involved in all staff, how I kind of found my niche, but also tell you a story about how that wasn't just something where I could just raise my hand one day and say, I want to do this. There was some personal growth that had to come with that as well. So, I mean, just to give you a little bit of an introduction to me, my name is Ashton Steele, and I am an introvert. I can be incredibly shy and awkward. In fact, doing this presentation is kind of awkward for me right now. In the past and currently still, I do struggle with depression and anxiety at times. But I'm getting to a place now where I can say that I can manage it a little bit better. I can often struggle with feelings of abandonment thanks to my childhood. And there could be very trivial things that happen even within the workplace or with friends that can really trigger those feelings for me. And I'm in a point right now where I'm trying to, figure out how to mitigate that. With all that being said, I am an SEC in Clark County. I'm a mentor. I am the Lunch and Learn coordinator, and I've been involved in several projects, even here at Trillium, where I wasn't just randomly selected. I had to go way outside my comfort zone to get involved in things, and that's really what I want to focus on is, how Trillium can promote that space for everyone to get a little bit awkward, but still feel safe doing so. So I do want to go over a little bit of history, and I added in, the words personal, foggy, secret, endure, ugly, distant, alone, not confident, because those are ways that I would actually describe my personal history and even my work history as well. And I want to talk about my work history and how that kind of, goes into me having a growth mindset, and then split it apart from coming to Trillium and what that's been like. So I'm going to take you through things in a very intentional sequence. I am going to tell you some things that it might seem like it's kind of dragging on for you guys, but it's a very intentional method, and I hope that you can stick with me through it. And my disclaimer is that although I do hope you get some nuggets of wisdom, I don't promise you any aha moments or career or life-changing words of wisdom that you can take away from it, but fingers crossed. So I'm going to start off here by showing you, this is me when I was a baby, and I hope you guys all find that to be super cute. Or my daughter looks a lot like me. I'm the youngest of three. I was a very, very active kid right from the beginning. Did well in school. Again, cute baby, and for as long as I can remember, learning new things and making people laugh was kind of my forte. And here are a couple other cute pictures of me. I think the left one was before I got into kindergarten, and I've been told that I look like Charlie from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the original, in that photo. And then the one on the right, I want to say, is probably when I was around second grade. And I was the kid that my mom had to force me to wear these clothes, because otherwise I was out on the football field with the boys at recess, playing basketball, playing baseball, playing hockey. And then after school, I did the same thing with the boys in my neighborhood. So I'm going to show you 3 more pictures that I really don't like showing anybody. But they kind of, tell a little bit of story in my life. At a certain point, I started experiencing the side effects of hypothyroidism, and I went about half my life with being undiagnosed from it. And I think it kind of, the next 3 photos kind of tell a story of where things at my home kind of were going awry. So I started gaining weight without any reason. As active as I was, I couldn't explain. My parents couldn't explain it. My parents didn't really try to find reasons for why it was happening, just telling me to go out and work out more, which I was doing. And I stopped really wanting to take care of myself. I didn't have the energy to really do anything. It was hard for me to get up in the morning. By the time I was in high school, I think I fell asleep in every single class that I had. Still managed to get good grades though, thankfully, but I think that's where my creativity really came out, because I could find the exact perfect point to fall asleep without, me missing anything. And yeah, so, I mean, you can kind of see, I was super cute, and then this is kind of where, my parents, that's me and my dad holding a fish together, but I feel like I could see, at least from like my attire, from my hair, like mom stopped telling me what to wear. She wasn't as involved anymore. And so by the time that I had left high school, my mom's dad, her mother, and her brother had all passed away. And at some point that I'm not entirely sure of, she was addicted to gambling, and it became so pervasive by the time that I was in high school, even middle school, that I would only see her 2 days out of the week, and we lived in the same house. One of those days she spent in bed, so I really only saw her 1 day out of the week. My dad was the husband of a wife who is addicted to gambling, and that came with its own stressors on top of having kids at home. My sister lived at home, and my freshman year of high school, she got pregnant. And so for the majority of my high school career, there was a newborn living at home, or eventually a toddler even. At one point, my parents got divorced. I think it was my senior year. And then I was finally diagnosed with and began getting treated for hypothyroidism. And as I started getting treated, I started having my first bouts of panic attacks, because it was kind of like I was waking up to everything that was happening. So why share the history? Because history is who you are. Everything that happens to us when we're little, no matter how much older we get, it has a direct impact to who we are today. I don't gamble because my mom was heavily addicted to gambling, but on the same token, I also developed my own unhealthy coping mechanisms for things. I know one thing that I kind of took on was becoming someone that I was the kid that did good in school, did sports and everything, because I felt like it took, it like eased things at home. I wasn't adding on to what was already going on. And that kind of put me into this spot where I could kind of make myself go unseen even, and avoid trouble that way, or avoid getting yelled at. So yeah, like I said, not developing healthy coping skills as a result of my parents' own habit, along with them not being present. I had zero self-esteem. I didn't, like, that wasn't built up at all by my parents or even my siblings, because as much as we love to have siblings be loving and nurturing as children, it usually doesn't happen until you grow up and realize how much you were horrible to one another. And at one point I did in my career become an alcoholic, and at work I made myself as small and unnoticeable as possible. And so, I mean, the kind of the draw from, you know, the history into work now, eventually getting on the way to Trillium, is that, you know, who we are outside of work, it definitely translates to who we are at work. The same as at home, where I made myself unseen and just did good and didn't want to add on to anybody else's thing. I did the same at work. I worked as hard as I could. I didn't want to be the person that someone had to check in on. I had a lot of micromanagers, and so working hard and getting stellar, you know, performance reviews made me feel good, because I felt like I wasn't the employee that had to be checked on. And kind of I guess the bad thing about that is that with how hard I was working, I hoped that my performance would get me recognition that I like really craved, because I felt like, I mean, especially in childhood, I didn't get a lot of recognition for things. And it also made it kind of counter to that, is that I've never been someone who would speak up for the things that I wanted to. And so the next few slides, I want to go into kind of who I was as a worker in some of my previous jobs, and kind of what their standards were, and talk about that relationship there. So There's a place in Vancouver called SEH America, and they are a wafer making company. They're actually based out of Japan, and I know that they have locations in like Texas and other states. But it's a company where if you work on the production floor, you get into a bunny suit and you zip up from head to toe. It's a clean room environment. And I ran something that was called the clean line. And essentially, if you could imagine, you're given like 50 CDs, and you have to stack them into this press. And in between each CD, you have to put this like rubber buffer in between. That was my job. That was what I was hired to do. And it was so like mind-numbingly boring for me that I tried to challenge myself to do it faster. I remember, we'd have these cassettes of essentially like 50 CDs, and we would have 50 to 100 of them on the shelves that needed to go through the clean line, and people telling me, you don't have to get this all done before you leave. And I was like, well, I'm going to, because there's nothing else to do. And all I'm doing is putting these two things into this press and then pressing a button and then unloading them. So I challenged myself to do it super fast without breaking any of them because they were fragile. And at the end of it, at the end of my my time there, my manager actually told me that I did it faster than anybody, and I was so good at it that she wanted me to train the person that was going to take my spot. With that being said, I missed out on a raise because I had to leave one shift early to go to the doctors, and I was out sick the following day. And SEH America being a production heavy company, any absences was on your profile, was on your employee record, and would count against you for anything. So they were so tight on how they gave raises, on how they gave promotions, essentially, that just that one day of leaving sick and then going to the doctors and having to be out the next day, I actually missed out on a raise. Even though I did my job better than anybody else that had done it before. And as hard as I worked, with my reviews there, just to kind of, again, paint the picture of how strict of a company they were, as well as I did all the kudos I got from my manager at the end of it, the reviews that I got were just, I met expectations. And that's something that infuriated me then, because it's like, I did this faster than anybody, but I also did what was exactly outlined in my job description. I didn't do anything else. I didn't ask for more. I didn't ask to learn more. I didn't ask to train anybody, even though I eventually got to train the person that replaced me when I left. And I also never asked the question of what would I need to do to earn more if I wanted to earn more money. I think, within a company like that, they probably would have told me that I needed to be there every single day. And I think I ended up working there for about 8 months, and I only missed that day and a half, and that was something that counted against me. That was my experience at SEH. And again, I was someone that just kept my head down. I worked as hard as I could, challenged myself, and ended up being super pissed off when I didn't get, recognition. I did at the end by training somebody, but I didn't get it financially by getting the raise that I wanted. So I ended up leaving and being pissed off at the company. So I'll go next to Ryonet. That was the company that I worked for the 6 years prior to coming to Trillium. And my role there was essentially in a call center type setting. I would get calls, incoming phone calls of people who were screen printers that needed troubleshooting. Either they're on the press and they're squeegeeing the ink through the screen, and the print on the shirt wasn't coming out the way that they wanted it to. Maybe they had like the screen pull up some of the ink, so their print was all splotchy, or they had fibers of the shirt poking up through the ink, so the texture was super bumpy, or they're having issues with the computer software that they're using to design, or the inkjet printer that they're using to print off the films that they need for the process. Or just, you know, the actual like heavy duty equipment that they were using to actually print with. I got a wide array of different calls. The learning curve in that specific position, I would say it took about 5 years to where I felt super, maybe 4 to 5 years where I felt super comfortable within the technical support role of answering questions. And it was something that was super intimidating because the majority of the people calling in were entrepreneurs who were expecting you to answer their questions because they were trying to make money. They're trying to make money off of selling t-shirts. And so, you know, imagine like how nerve-wracking it could be to be talking to someone on the phone. Note that when I started in this role, I had 0 screen printing experience. So basically anything that I was telling these people for troubleshooting, it was something that I read online or something that someone told me secondhand. Trying to tell somebody that, and then also taking online chats at the same time. And usually I had like 2 to 3 customers in online chats that I was responsible for answering while I was on the phone with somebody, trying to troubleshoot them through something that I hadn't done myself. And they just want to get off the phone with me so that they can make more money. It was something that was just a big fall of a bad situation for me personally, for my self-esteem, for my confidence. In addition to that, I also managed the online ticketing system. They use this, they essentially had like a online library where they had all their YouTube videos posted or any learning articles. And customers could also submit online tickets there that were kind of like emails. And so I was the one that was in charge with posting all the new content onto that library. And then I also responded to all of those tickets that people submitted as well. And then the way that Ryonet scored things is pretty much every single review that I got, I was good to outstanding. A lot of times I was beyond meets expectations. I went above and beyond in my reviews. A lot of times I was given raises when they were offered. And there was some mobility that I had, but it wasn't because I asked for it. When I first started at Ryonet, I started off in reception. And at that point in time, I was in reception with 2 or 3 other people, depending on the time of the year. And we were kind of looked at as a group of people that didn't know anything from the sales reps or the tech support reps. Because every single call that we got, the way that the company was set up at that time was that every single phone call, and there were hundreds of phone calls every single day that came in, it came to our lines, the receptionist lines. And then we had to pick up the call, thank the customer for holding, ask them what they need help with. And if it was a sales or technical support inquiry, we had to put them on hold. And then we had to find a rep to take them off that part. There wasn't just a queue that we could send them off to. And the only reason why I ended up getting any sort of mobility at that point into technical support was because I got really pissed off at people thinking that I didn't know anything, but I also hadn't been trained to do anything else. And so the one time that I was able to start moving into technical support, I had to actually start doing stuff off the clock. And then later on, When I started realizing that, technical support wasn't really fitting into what I wanted to do, that I was really more interested in training staff on how to troubleshoot different screen printing issues, because we didn't have any sort of system like that. We had a system that taught people how to screen print, that showed them exactly how it's supposed to go perfectly every single time, but we didn't have any training on how, what to do when things go wrong, how to troubleshoot it. My idea was to put together a training system for anybody that went into sales or technical support. And the one time that I actually started moving in the direction specific to what I realized that I wanted to do, I went through a few different managers, but I went and talked to my manager first, and he wasn't on board with it. He didn't want to use company time to train us or to train people who are being tasked to troubleshoot. And so I went to his manager and said, we need help. We need some sort of training program for this. And when that didn't work, I ended up going and setting time with a consultant that the company had hired to help with getting employees that fit into the department that they would work best in. And so it was something that I probably spent about 2.5 years going to different people in management saying, we need to do this, and getting told no, and going to that person's manager. And I had a few different management changes, so I think I ended up going to a total of 3 or 4 different managers with this idea. And it wasn't until I went to the outside consultant and said that we really needed this program in place that I actually started doing training towards creating that actual program. So just some, trends for working at SEH and Ryonet is that me as an employee, I was someone that just put my head down and I worked as hard as I could. And I was also that person that got really pissed off when my coworkers got recognized for things and I wasn't getting recognized for them. At Ryonet specifically, there were, sales reps after sales reps who got chosen, or I thought got chosen to go to trade shows. They get to travel to California or to Texas or to New York or to New Jersey to do these screen printing trade shows. And there I was sitting in my 4th or 5th year with the company, getting pissed off that someone that had only worked there for 6 months was going to a trade show, wondering why is that person going and why am I not? I was just hoping that those companies would, see my performance as a reason to compensate me in the ways that I thought was fair. In all the years in both companies, the first upward movement happened within the first 6 months of the 6 years I was at Ryonet. So that transition that I said I made from being a receptionist into being a technical support person, that wasn't because I asked for it. I did get mad, and I went home and I started learning how to screen print on my own so I could answer questions. I was mad that people thought that I didn't know anything. But the only reason why I got that upward mobility is because it filled the need of the company at that time. They had, can't remember if one of the people in tech support had quit or got fired or got promoted, but essentially somebody left that position and it opened up. And here was me putting in initiative, and they said, okay, well, if she's willing to, spend time off the clock learning this, then let's go ahead and put her in this position. The second movement I had, it took over a year before I found the right person to talk to, and that was me moving into starting that training program. And I had to go through several no's before I got someone to actually accept a version of what I was looking to do. And then something that's super consistent with each of those locations, even at Ryonet, where I spent 6 years working with a lot of the same people, that had very superficial relationships with all of my managers, and I would say 99% of the people I worked with. Yeah, so by the end of all of it, this was the question that I was raising to myself. I wasn't sure if I got to this point where I didn't feel like I was happy in life, and I thought, you know, maybe it was my career choice that was making me so unhappy. And I eventually at Ryonet got, again, super pissed off, whether it was over a phone call or something that a coworker told me. There was one day that the right combination of things happened, and I went home and got on Craigslist and went to the nonprofits section because I had been a job coach before, and saw Trillium's posting for Clark County and applied, and here I am today. So coming to Trillium, a big question I had was, what in the hell is actually going on here? From working at SEH, from working at Ryonet, places that I had to clock in and out, it was super weird that I could show up when it works best for me. It was super weird that I could make my own schedule. I think it probably took about 8 months to a year before I thought it was okay to show up to the office after 9 o'clock. I would show up probably about 7:30, 8 o'clock every single day. It was super weird that my manager was in my face 24/7 about how I was performing. And it was also super weird that customers, or AKA our clients and parents and employers, weren't yelling at me for some reason. But then on the flip side of it, there's all these face-to-face interactions that I had to have with people that I didn't know. And that scared the hell out of me too. So I had to go into businesses or even call. Like at that point, I think I had, you know, some form of PTSD about talking to people on the phone when I started here, that it scared me to even call a business, let alone go into one. Going to networking events scared me. Meeting new people regularly, even new coworkers, scared me. And I often thought to myself, I have no self-esteem, I have no confidence. How am I actually going to do this? And so I found this picture that I think accurately depicts how I felt and what all my tasks were here at Trillium. And so I'm Sigourney Weaver, and all the things I had to do that involved people were the alien. And I felt that way, I think, probably for probably until I had been here about 1.5 years, maybe approaching the 2-year mark. It was mostly, you know, ironically enough, as much as I want to help people, the idea of actually talking to them to help them really scared me. So I would say from about 6 months in to working here at Trillium to where I am now, involved a lot of crying, not so much wine, but definitely a lot of crying. I thought that, you know, changing my career and coming to Trillium would be kind of like the fix-all, because we spend so much time at our jobs that I kind of naively had it in my head that if I switched my career and found something that made me happy, that made me feel like I had purpose at work, that I would just be happier in my personal life. And I got here, and probably for 8 months to a year was still like in awe that I could make my own schedule and that I was actually helping people in a way that that made me feel had purpose, and like I was actually having an impact on other people's lives. But I wasn't like incredibly happy all of a sudden, and I wasn't happier as a whole either. So it was kind of a shock to me that not everything was fixed right away. And so I'd say within the first year of working here, that there are multiple team members that I bonded with pretty closely, and one of which had encouraged me to seek out counseling through the EAP. And I'd never gone through counseling before. I hadn't even started taking any like medication or anything for depression or anxiety, or even come to terms with the fact that I had depression and anxiety to work through until I came to Trillium, until I started going to counseling. So I called up the EAP, and for those of you who haven't done it, it's a super easy, non-threatening experience. If you're someone that thinks that you might need to do counseling, I could tell you from a firsthand experience of someone that not only contacted them once to start counseling, but contacted them a second time to switch counselors. They ask you who you work for, ask your name, maybe a couple other questions about like availability and whatnot, and then they do the legwork to seek out people that will take our insurance. And I want to say probably within a business week of calling them, I had different counselors calling me and leaving me voicemails trying to set up meetings. So there's that. So yeah, back to this gift or picture. I ended up crying like a lot. I think I've cried more since I started working at Trillium than I have in my entire life. And going through counseling, switching counselors, even through the non-superficial relationships I was making with teammates here at Trillium, I realized that just having a job that made me feel better about what I was doing for a living wasn't going to make me happier overall. And I had to make some choices and some changes personally to get to where I wanted to go. And I think the big takeaway is that with showing this picture is that and making that connection of who you are in your personal life directly correlates to who you are at work. I think of we have a couple of people here who have been servers in past careers, and servers, they say they have that server voice when they talk to parents or maybe businesses, and makes me think of that link again between who you are personally and who you are at work, because there are people who quote unquote have that server voice because they know that how they come off is a certain way, and maybe it's because they're introverted and they're scared to death of what people are going to say, and so they want to come off as super happy, but there's still that correlation there. And I think that's something that I really want to point out. I think I've used a lot of different tools in trying to, the EAP and going to counseling being one of them, but even listening to a lot of audiobooks and whatnot about different ways to push my own limits. And I could say, if you're someone who's an introvert, if you feel like you're kind of stuck to where you're too uncomfortable to push those boundaries, that counseling isn't for everybody. I know that, but listening to a lot of different audiobooks or reading a lot of different books on different ways that you can test your boundaries and do so in a safe way are good ways of finding different tips and tools that will work for you. So some things that I figured out through counseling, and I kind of talked about it before in going over my history, is that going quote unquote unseen by being that person that did a good job that nobody had to check in on was a coping mechanism. And it definitely played out professionally for me because as much as I didn't want to get bad attention, get yelled at or anything, it also made it so I wasn't getting the good attention that I desperately wanted. I'm someone, I can definitely say that I am an introvert, but I do want people to give me kudos. I want to get a pat on the back. If I get someone a job, which I did do today, I want people to say what a great job I did. And I think I don't present that very well because of how much I've like trained myself to kind of fade into the background. I also learned that negative self-talk was a way for me to give myself permission not to grow, or in other words, not to ask for more and to find ways to be content. And I think, you know, working at Trillium now for about 2.5 years, there are definitely pockets in our jobs where we can definitely become either content or put our head down and work and not try things that are kind of outside the box. And I think if, you know, you start to notice those trends happening where you kind of feel like you're going through the motions, then that's definitely kind of, you know, that's something that's a red flag, especially if you're someone that's wanting to experience any type of mobility or any type of, or getting involved with anything like all staff or any type of other projects that Trillium has to offer. I realized that not just at work, but especially at work, that relationships can be important. I think careers are obviously very important for a lot of reasons. We're in the business of advocating to get individuals who haven't had the opportunity to work in, you know, places that they want to out into the workforce and have a career, because they get some, you know, support systems and experiences and whatnot. And to me, I think of relationships at work being especially important because, I mean, there is the whole financial reason for having a job, and, you know, no one's going to want to keep you on the staff if you're not very nice all the time, and you know, you're not going to do well in customer service if you tell people to go away all the time. So aside from that, we spend the majority of our time every single week with the people that we work with. So, I mean, that's a big reason why I think the relationships that we have with our coworkers are more important than even in our personal lives, because just that ratio of time that we spend making sure that you have quality relationships, good working relationships with everybody, because nobody wants to go to work for 8 hours a day and be like, Gina over there in the corner really pisses me off, and she's always in the corner, and, you know, feeling anxiety all the time over it. And another thing that I realized, and this may not be true for everybody, but something that I definitely have come to terms with, is that I cannot be a different person outside of work than when I am at work. They're like, it's the same person. So if I need to be happier in some way, then any change that I have to make at work to be happier is often probably the same change that I need to make at home. So here's where I kind of start getting into things that have given me fear in the past, and I call them snakes, and I don't like snakes, like real ones. I don't like them. But public speaking is something that I definitely fear, and it's something that I have pushed myself to do probably since I was in middle school or high school. And it's only become recently that I've become comfortable with it. So it's been, something I've worked on for like half my life, literally. People finding out that I'm a phony is something that I like dread. People thinking that I'm not knowledgeable, whether it's, in this career field, if, people think that I'm not knowledgeable in screen printing or something. I really struggle with that. I guess I'm kind of prideful in feeling like I have, wisdom to offer. Meeting new people definitely gives me the shakes. I get nervous meeting new people. I don't want to do things wrong, especially on a stage full, in front of people. I don't want to give bad ideas. And I also don't want to get turned down for an idea that I give. And so I think these are things that probably a lot of people, especially at work, feel. And so this has kind of been my my formula of overcoming those fears. So I know some of you weren't here for the all staff where we talked about the yay for failing. So for those of you that, weren't here for that all staff, I think that was kind of the one where it made me realize that I was putting way too much pressure on myself and that I was the major source of the anxiety that I was experiencing at work. Essentially what happened, we had an improv group and the entire Trillium team was split into two groups, just, so our circles were smaller essentially. And everybody got into a circle and they'd start us off by, one person started off by running to somebody across the circle and saying their name. And then that person would run across to somebody else saying their name and so on and so forth. And that was layer one. And then layer two would be running across the circle and saying, a number. And then someone else would run across the circle. And then that was layer two. And they kept building up, I think as many as 3 or 4 layers. And then at one point, they put all the layers into one activity. And so you started off with running across and telling somebody your name. And then eventually in the midst of that, someone's coming up to you and telling you what the number is. And then maybe another person telling you what the color is. And a lot of this, and I was like standing there getting so stressed trying to figure out who was going to run up to me and how would I know to run to the person I needed to. And feeling like I had to remember everything. And then kind of in the middle of it, I was like, what am I doing? Like, I'm so stressed out. This is an all staff where we're supposed to be having fun. And I'm wearing a Christmas sweater that sparkles and like, I shouldn't be stressing out this bad. And going home and recapping that, I realized that, that I was building up that stress in so many different aspects of working at Trillium. So, calling a client's parent who may or may not be upset about their client not having a job yet. I was trying to figure out what that person was going to say without even calling them, instead of just calling them to figure out what they were going to say. I was trying to pre-plan exactly what was going to happen when I walked into a business and what I was going to say, instead of just walking into a business and saying what felt natural and responding with what felt natural. And then as far as like public speaking goes, I started realizing that a lot of the stress and embarrassment or for fumbling over words or whatever, all that I was experiencing was my own. I would give presentations at all staff and have technical issues with what I was presenting, and people still talk to me afterwards, and they even asked for my help on things, even though there were technical issues. Or I would be super nervous and stumble over words, and people would tell me that they thought I did a really great job of presenting my ideas very logically. Nobody ever came up to me and told me that I did a crappy job. So all that was all my own. And so essentially the point of all that was to say that I think Trillium is like the most safe place that anybody can stick their neck out there and try something, and nobody's going to come up to you and tell you that you're doing a crappy job. And if they do tell you that you do a crappy job and they don't tell you that you've done anything good, then like I would go straight to my manager and say, Gina is such a jerk. Like, I don't even know why she's on our team. So there are things that I knew that I wanted to do, and that's the reason why I was putting myself in those awkward positions. I knew that I wanted to present or help with being involved in all staff. I knew I wanted to mentor all staff. I knew I want to be confident in training individuals with higher support needs and be really great at systematic instruction. I want to be confident in going into a business for JD, be confident in saying, I don't know, but I can find out for you. I want to be recognized as someone that all my peers could go and ask questions to. I wanted the title of being SEC. I wanted to feel okay with saying no to things, and I wanted to know what niche I could place myself into. And identifying all these things is just like the first step. After that, it's actually putting it into motion. So here's the things that I did. The number one thing was that I have a really great working relationship with my manager. And my manager is someone that I can share my interests with. I know what their interests are. And my manager is someone that I can go to and just think of some, random idea. And even if it probably is a bad idea, my manager is really great at not saying that's a bad idea. My manager will maybe instead say, well, what do you think will happen if we do this? Like, what happens if this happens? And ask a lot of smart questions about any idea that I come up with. And so even if, my idea never comes to fruition, she's someone that makes me think critically about the things that I'm coming up with. Also, in goal planning, I told my manager that I wanted to help at all staff and that I wanted to get a refresher in systematic instruction so that I can use it in discovery. And together we made a plan. It wasn't something where, she told me like, no, you're not going to do that. And I feel pretty confident to say, any one of our managers, if there was something that we really want to do, even if it didn't really, at the time, feel like it fit into the scope of what we're doing with our clients, if there's something that we really wanted to do that, maybe it benefits employment consultants or associates or staff in general, more than the clients, there's probably a way to do it. And I don't think that any PM is going to be like, nope, that's a bad idea. We're not going to do that. So we made a plan together. I also said that I wanted to mentor new staff, and I asked what I would need to do in order to be able to do that. And then as far as finding, my niche, I'm going to talk about that later. But I took time throughout my day, anytime that I did discovery or did JD or did support while employed or, helped with any kind of tools or whatnot, I kind of started taking intentional reflection time to, rank how I felt about those different areas. And, there were things that I excelled at that ended up in that, my team members recognized me for being really good at, but they're not things that I would even consider to be my niche. And then lastly, there are things I started paying attention to that actually scared me. And I started questioning why they scare me. And maybe the word isn't scare, maybe it just gives me anxiety or makes me feel a little uncomfortable. And I just started saying yes to doing those things and moving forward that way. I also got comfortable with saying no. I started saying no to trainings if I felt like either A, I couldn't put it to practical use, or if it just didn't fit into what I wanted to do. I started getting comfortable with saying no. Part of what made me into an SEC is that I am a go-to person for my team. And part of that is I kind of, to a fault, make myself so available to my team members that I now have to find creative ways to get some of my paperwork done. But I think every single one of my teammates knows that they can come to me and ask me questions, and I'll stop what I'm doing to help them out. I became very intentional with JD to kind of take the pressure off of me. And so I've invited my manager to go with me. I invited the other SEC to go with me, just to critique every single thing about my delivery, how I came off, what did you think about what I said, what I wore, how did I handle this objection? And we talked about it afterwards. And for me, that kind of seemed to be the thing that made me less anxious about going into a business for whatever reason. And then I also kind of covered it before with saying no to things that just didn't fall in line with things that really excited me. Going to Employment Advocacy Day, I think it's super important, but I've done it. And I think there are other people that are much more excited than I am that should definitely do it. So hindsight, is always 2020. Someone's always got to go through those painful moments, those awkward moments, those anxious moments and whatnot, to kind of figure out how things should go or to make their own path. And so when I look back on all this, when I was making this presentation, I found out, I wouldn't say I found out, but I was able to make a list of things that I definitely believe when it comes to going to work. And that one, that there is a relationship between you and your employer, not just you and your program manager or you and your coworkers, but your employer as a whole. And if you think about it in terms of a relationship like you would your partner when you go home, how do you think you're doing? Do you come in and you do exactly what's expected of you? Are there things that you're not communicating to your employer that you're wanting and you're not getting it? You're getting, kind of like, I'd really like my husband to do the dishes more, but he's not doing it. And I'm getting mad that he's not doing it, but I'm also not asking him to do the dishes more. So is that sort of thing happening, or are you asking for the things that you want? And are you getting them? And if you're not getting them, are you going to somebody else who will listen? There have been times here at Trillium where there have been things that I thought were a great idea that my manager didn't think was a great idea, that I ended up going to other people about, and things ended up happening, and that's totally cool. Trillium's the best place to do that, in my opinion. Another thing that I feel very strongly about is that if you go to work every day and you do exactly what is in your job description, then your paycheck is your acknowledgement for doing your job. If you want to do more, then you need to do more, and not just do, but again, going back to having that relationship with your peers, with your management, with the company itself, saying that you want to do more and actually put plans into action, and doing that even if it scares you. And for the introverts who don't like feeling awkward, or for the extroverts who hate getting up and speaking or doing things outside their comfort zone, practice makes better. And I think I talked about this previously, but I think Trillium's the absolute safest place. If you're someone that doesn't like public speaking, but you want to be involved more, then put yourself in the spot to do public speaking in front of your Trillium peers, because I guarantee you that we're so good, we're so trained at being able to tell someone, I think you did a really great job, you had the right idea in doing this, but I think next time this could be better. We're so good at doing that compliment sandwich that it, even if people have suggestions for you, you don't feel bad about it. And then if you practice putting yourself outside of your comfort zone, whether that's, creating a better relationship with your peers, with your manager, with employers, with your clients parents, their guardians, etc., the more practice that you get with it, eventually that feeling of awkwardness will start to go away, especially if you start to think about why you're feeling that way. Some other things is that you might have the best relationship in the world with your boss, but that doesn't mean that they know what you want. Again, going back to that relationship style, telling them what you want. I became a mentor because I said that I wanted to be a mentor. I think being an SEC is probably like the one thing where I didn't tell my PM that I wanted to be an SEC, but everything that I was asking for and saying that I did want, I think fell in line with what an SEC does, and that's eventually how I got promoted. I made it very apparent to my managers that I love learning new things and learning other people's perspectives. And so, I mean, that's how I ended up falling into doing the lunch and learns. And then I also think a very important thing is telling your boss and your peers how you want to be celebrated. Telling you guys now that, I really love getting kudos and getting props for the things that I do. I haven't told a single person that, so you guys are the first to hear it. But I love getting recognized for the things that I do. And it doesn't, have to be something big or elaborate, but, getting a kudos at a staff meeting or, just someone like recognizing something that I did, saying, hey, I really like that you did this. I mean, that's something that makes my day. So telling people how you like to be celebrated is really important too. And then, I mean, again, just to reiterate, Trillium is the sixth place of employment that I've been at. And it's definitely been the safest place I've ever, quote unquote, found to fail. And just really quick, I want to give a rundown on what like failing, quote unquote, has actually looked like for me. So for JD, I've been shut down over and over again, both in person, via email, people not responding, etc. And at first it was very uncomfortable because I walked in and I felt like a job was on the line. Once I started focusing on my approach and focusing on being genuine and trying to, make just a connection with the person and make them want to talk to me, and really narrowing down my focus, I was able to experience less anxiety about the entire situation and felt like I could be more approachable. Again, no one at Trillium has ever told me that I've had a bad idea, but they do ask a lot of questions. And even when questions are asked, it's not necessarily about them trying to tell me that's a bad idea, but maybe trying to get a little bit more information. And I kind of talked about this, about having glitches in presentations and my embarrassment being my own. And just, I think, those are, learning experiences. Anytime that there's some sort of glitch, the more you practice and the more opportunity that you have to have those quote unquote fail opportunities, the more you're able to realize what, realize what you could better do in those situations. There are a few more slides that I had that are specifically about talking about what it is to look like for failing. I wanted to talk about how discovery is my niche and it has more to do with learning and troubleshooting. But I know that we are running out of time and I could definitely send my presentation out if you want it, but I know we're just past 3:30. So I just wanted to open it up now. If anybody has any questions or anything that they wanted to share or anything, go for it. Otherwise, I don't want to take too much more time.
Thank you for sharing your story, Ashton.
Thanks for attending.
Yeah, Ashton, I wanted to thank you for your vulnerability and sharing about your past. And I really loved hearing your story about the things you struggle with career-wise, because we are very similar. So that makes me feel better to know that I'm not the only one that feels that way.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear that. All right. Well, thanks for joining, guys. I hope you get one little takeaway. And yeah, like I said, I can, if you guys want me to send the presentation, I can. Otherwise, it's recorded and can send out the link as well.
Thanks, Ashton. It was great.
Happy holidays.